Hello, Canada. I'm Michele Tittler from the political organization End Race-Based Law, and we're all about ending race-based law. We want to reopen the Constitution and abolish any mention of special interest groups and race-based law for Quebec and the Aboriginals. I'm going to talk to you about what's going on in Canada right now with the Aboriginals. It's very serious, and everyone seems to have just let the issue go and let other people handle it, politicians and lawyers, and it's become an industry that's costing you, the taxpayer, billions and billions of dollars every year. And it's not helping the Aboriginals or the average guy. And in fact, they're angrier now than they ever have been before. And they've got this Idle No More campaign happening this summer, 2013. And they've threatened to shut down industry, mining, roadblocks, hydro lines, you name it. And I have been in the thick of Idle No More for the last 6 months, and I can tell you I've heard from thousands and thousands and thousands of Aboriginals across Canada, and we have a serious problem, we really do. They have, beyond any other dialogue, claimed that 100% of Canada belongs to them, that it's their territory. Even though they are different nations, 600 plus nations, all of the land, just based on their race, belongs to them. None of us, none of the 32 million people who live here really own land according to them. They have native studies now going on in many universities across this country, and it may surprise you to know that there are actual studies in universities. This was new to me until recently. Believe me, it's been quite a journey to find out that there are university courses taught by a fellow named Tim Weiss on white privilege. Yes, white privilege. So your grandparents who worked really hard to build this country, and any other race that's been here, including the Chinese from the old days and the Chinese from now, they're not included in this conversation or those studies. These studies are all about white privilege, which really ties in with the Aboriginal dialogue too, because they've got this whole white privilege thing going on too. I think they really do think that someone gave us stuff. The dialogue is bizarre. The general premise is that you don't even know how racist you are as a white person because you're just so accustomed to being, to not being singled out as a white person. Of course, because we got over that. But you're racist just because you're white, and that you're privileged just because you're white. That really nothing that you worked for is yours anyway. And the Aboriginals backed this up with saying that nothing that you got wasn't from them, that it was off their backs because it's their land. So they're now claiming all the land, all of the resources, because it's their land, so that makes sense. And they want the money too from us taxpayers. And the government is always wrong, and it's never enough. And they blame the government for everything, no matter how bad the situation is on those reserves. And it's bad on some of them, very bad. There are a few successful reserves, but they really aren't the norm. The Aboriginal reserves, in any kind of studies, Canadian studies, tend to always be the most poverty-stricken and in need communities in all of Canada. And no matter how much money we pump into these people, it's never enough, and we're always wrong. And because of these race-based laws, they take us to court all the time, and they use those race-based laws to continuously, they blame actually the Indian industry themselves, they blame, but it's them that's, you know, keeping the whole thing going as well. They talk about, you'll hear Pam Palmater. Pam Palmater is an interesting person you need to get to know. She lost the election to Sean Atleo for the Assembly of First Nations. Sorry, that's my company. I also have Assembly of Second Nations, which is the rest of us who aren't them. I'm very offended by that name, the Assembly of First Nations. I rarely ever use it. I always refer to them as the Aboriginals because what they're always doing is saying we're first. And that was sort of the joke, tongue-in-cheek, of my organization called Assembly of Second Nations, which is what I started on Facebook when they started Idle No More, and they came at me by the tens of thousands. So I've heard from all the Aboriginals who are online, who are involved in Idle No More across Canada for the last 6 months. I really do know what I'm talking about when it comes to their dialogue and what they think is going on. Now, I'm gonna tell you what's going on. Here's something from a woman named Sharon Venn. She teaches Aboriginal kids. They wanted their own school system, so that's what they teach now. They teach the Aboriginal blame game, and that's what I call it, because that's what it is. It's indoctrinated now. Now it's actual studies. But you have to listen to this to actually believe it. It doesn't seem possible. Are you ready for this? Get ready. Listen carefully. She's teaching a group of Aboriginal students this.
Canada is not a nation.
We're not a nation.
Canada is a state. It's an artificial entity.
Artificial.
It was created by the British North American Act. They call it BNA Act, 1867. Under the British. So, you know, Canada doesn't have its own legal system.
We don't have our own.
They use the French and the English system, not unlike our laws. They don't have a real government structure. It's based on the British system. We
don't have
our
a real
own
structure.
governmental structure. Like,
okay, so she goes on like that for a while. And what's interesting about that is that they are nations, but we're not. Us 32 million with our own economy, with our own military, with our own political structure, we're not a nation, even though we're recognized around the world as a nation. But they are. Even if there are 87 people in their tribe, not a nation, tribe, or 300 people, that's really what they're about. You know, some of these tribes have 500 people, some have 1,500 people, but they're all considered nations. And all of those nations are trying to be on par with our government. And that's what Pam Palmater, who you'll be introduced to next, talks about to her people. That's their race. So even though a long time ago, and they'll even tell you when they come and argue with you that they're not all exactly the same, that they're not all the exact same culture, it seems they've never come together before in the history of their history, of mankind, for any other reason except to blame Canada, except to be against everyone else who's here and to blame them for losing their culture and everything else. Even though Canada has tried hard to, you know, put in programs and give them our own school system and on and on and on it goes. But let's listen to Pam Palmater now. Now this you have to really pay attention to because it's so shocking, it's hard to believe. I had to listen to it about 5 times. This is what they teach each other, and this is why they are successful parlaying this blame game against our government. They're organized and we're not, and that's the problem. We've all become very complacent and we have learned to feel sorry for them. And believe me, they've been very active for a long, long time, and we need to get active now too because our government officials have been handling this all by themselves. Now listen to this dialogue. This is, get this. And this means that you're doing this to them, and all of Canada is doing this to them, and the government is doing this to them. Now listen to how Pam Palmater explains it to their people who are very uneducated, who are living isolated on reserves, and this is the only brainwashing they get. Now you can see why they're so racist and organized in their bullying and blame game. Listen to this.
And that's still what they call it in Indian Affairs and Justice Canada, I used to work there so I know, is that their solitary objective, their policy objective for First Nations in this country has never changed.
Never changed.
From the time they developed it in the 1800s until now, on the books, the number one objective is to continue until there is not a single Indian left in Canada.
It's to continue so there's not a single Indian left in Canada.
And reserve lands and everything else. That's really...
Okay, she has just said that Canadian policy is to make sure that there's not a single Aboriginal person left. That's what she has literally just told this auditorium full of people. This is what's going on behind your backs while you go to work and work really hard so they can get, well, it's estimated up to $26 billion a year because they have so many programs, not just federally, but provincially, municipally. They take us to court on a constant basis. Now, the next part that she launches into is how the Indian industry gets so much money and how they're making so much money off of them. Meanwhile, it's them going to court on a constant basis. This is why we have to end race-based law. This Section 35 of the Constitution, which gives them special rights, allows them to go to court on a constant basis. So what they've done is they've taken the treaties and they've reinterpreted them over and over and over again. The treaties are really clear. The Aboriginals get huge parcels of land that they could easily have managed and lived off of and had their way of life. They've been given all the rights for fishing, hunting. I mean, they've knocked white or whatever color, whatever race, just not them, out of the running of being able to be involved in the fisheries. They're selling salmon backdoor when they're not supposed to be. They're breaking all the laws. They broke the treaties over and over and over again, but all they ever do is talk about how Canada is dishonorable and deceitful and lying. It's always us against them. Always, always, always us against them. And this is what they're indoctrinating in their people now. Here we are, a country filled with so many races and peoples and cultures and languages and foods and ways of life from around the world, and we all make it work. We celebrate each other. This is what makes Canada so great. And here we have this one group, and one group only, one race, that is indoctrinating this thinking, this blame game, and this racism, and it is full-on racism towards their people. And I'm going to address Tim Weiss and another woman who was part of Idle No More, Sheila McLean, who's a white woman who does Native studies, and she also does white privilege stuff. Listen, I want to tell you people, never before in the history of time did I ever know that I was white until you racists started talking like that. Do you know that white people are actually more diversified than all of the cultures of the Indians here? Yes, from Swedish to French to Italian to Russian to Australian to, I mean, it's just such a wide array. The Ukrainians, the Polish, they all spoke different language, they all had different foods. They came to Canada and they learned to work together. They learned to get over racism. They intermingled, they intermarried, they made children with each other. They learned to work side by side, to go to school side by side. We have many other cultures here, not just the white-skinned people. We have everybody. We have everybody from around the world, and we make this work. This is an amazing experiment, and we have to feel proud of that as Canadians. For them to talk to us, and they do, they speak to us in vile ways about how this is their land, and we're just squatters, and we should just go home. You know, we have ancestors that are buried here. This is Canada. This is our home. This is where we belong. Now, I want you to listen to this. This is very interesting and very important, because this is the difference. This is the fundamental difference. The Aboriginals will go on and on and on about the treaties, which they break all the time. Canada has done nothing but honor the treaties and go over and above the call of duty, trying to answer to all of their needs. They're continuously asking for self-governance and self-determination on our money, constantly blaming the government of Canada for everything. The residential school thing is unbelievable, because now they're on computers in the 21st century speaking in English, taking us to court on a constant basis. All of the world got taught English. All of the world went to school based on the British system. It's not so bad that we all speak the same language. But let me get to this point. This is about our governments versus their government. And this is what the fundamental difference is between why they can't fit into the rest of Canada and why they keep fighting Canada. And why they keep fighting to stay behind and stay in racism. And they're so racist. You have to hear them talk, in particular about white people. It is despicable. I've never heard that kind of language in all my life. Ever. But yeah, they have a real hate on for our government, for colonialism, for white people. Now, this is Elizabeth Rata. Is to be commended for her cogent and timely article published in the New Zealand Herald on tribalism and its effect on societies. It requires little reflection on international history over the past century to conclude that the slaughter of humans all over Africa, the Balkans, the Middle East, Turkey, India, Sri Lanka, China, Indonesia, Japan, Eastern Europe, Indonesia, the Philippines, etc., 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 has been the result of tribal cultures. Tribalism, democracy, incompatible. Tribalism and democracy are incompatible. They cannot exist together as political systems in the one nation. As the late New Zealand historian Professor Peter Muntz noted, the condition for democracy is everywhere the end of tribalism, with its birth ascribed inequality and exclusive kin membership. The incompatibility goes deep into the very structure of politics. Tribalism is based on principles of inequality. Democracy is based on equality. Kin status is what matters in the tribe. Citizenship is a democratic status. Tribalism is exclusive. To belong, you must have ancestors who were themselves born into the system. A democracy, by contrast, includes people from all backgrounds. The equality versus inequality, inclusion versus exclusion, incompatibility goes deep into the very nature of the political system. Democracy has three elements: the nation, the state, and the citizen. The nation is the overall framework and idea we have of ourselves as the nation. The state is parliament and all the institutions and systems of government. Citizens are the subject of the nation state and have rights that flow from, along with the responsibilities to, the system. The principle of universalism is the base upon which these three elements rest. Universalism. Indeed, democracy could only become a political system once this principle was widely accepted. Universalism justifies the equal status of the citizen. It justifies our human rights, including the right to have a cultural or religious identity. Democratic universalism doesn't rule out various forms of cultural identity within one nation. Tribalism does. Democracy separates political status from cultural, racial identity. Tribalism is unable to do so. Many have a religion, but their religious identity is not part of the political arrangements, although the right to exercise their religion is. Race and culture are like religion and identity, but not a political status. We meet in the political sphere as equal citizens, not as members of a religion, a race, or a tribe. For this reason, race or cultural identity cannot be included as a political status in a constitution. What a constitution can include is the right that each individual has to exercise his or her cultural identity. It is a right enshrined in legislation which protects the ongoing identification people may have with their racial heritage. It is a right that can only exist because our equal status as citizens, as a status that comes from the universalist principle that we are all equal as human beings. Just as bishops and priests lost their considerable political power to democracy's system of accountable leadership, so too must today's Aboriginal leaders accept the same limitations. Their influence on the political system should be that of any other social organization or business corporation. Just as one sun is in the sky is true for the nation's sovereignty, so it is true for our institutions. Democracy can only exist in one unified nation with a constituted government accountable to its equaled citizens. Its three elements must stand united upon the foundation of the universal human being. That's what we're talking about. That's the difference. They have chiefs that just inherit the right to be in charge. People can be, well, there are stories we've gotten of some of the gangs burning elders out of their homes, and they're just, if someone wants to get rid of somebody on the reserve, they're just ousted. It's not democratic in any way, shape, or form. We can't seem to help these people because they won't even help themselves. I mean, everyone at one time was a tribalistic governed society. Whether you were 500 people, 50 people, or 5,000 people. Everyone was tribalistic in the old days. But what's happened now, and in particular in Canada, where we have such a wonderful, wonderful chance to be an experiment for the rest of time. I mean, man has migrated since the beginning of time. The Aboriginals can't seem to understand that. The Aboriginals have European DNA in them because very, very long ago, there's conclusive evidence that Europeans came here much before this last wave. And so there is European DNA in them. In fact, we really are all connected. And that's what this is supposed to be about. Canada has come so far overcoming racism. We have so many cultures here. First of all, the white people themselves just overcoming their own differences. I mean, don't forget that World War II was white people fighting white people. So what this white privilege thing is that these people are talking about, Tim Weiss and Sheila McLean, Pam Palmater, this gang, really they're racist. They're lumping us all together now when we've never been lumped together before in the history of mankind, but they've lumped us all together now. And they're trying to tell us that everything we have is from privilege, that our parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents who came here and built this country, enslaved and farmed on barren lands, were somehow privileged. Meanwhile, we've been the inventors, we've been the doers, we've been the creators of things, and we're being hammered for that now. Apparently, and this is what I hear from the Aboriginals, we're the scourge of the universe, pretty much. The racism is just astounding. And now it's even permeating into studies with this white privilege studies stuff. It's just, who cares? Really, honestly, who cares? I never knew what skin color I was, as I said, until these people recently, the last couple months. And I feel really grateful to my parents that they raised me without any of that racist thought in my head. And that Canada has been the kind of country where we really didn't get too much into that. We just talked about what our common needs were. And the Aboriginals speak as though they're so different. They don't have the common needs that everybody else does. Well, they do, basically. They're fundamental human rights. And people fought long and hard for civilization to advance to the point where we have democratic societies where we vote for our leader. We vote for somebody who's qualified, somebody who's studied, somebody who fits the bill, and we hold them accountable for their leadership, and we can fire them if we want to. The Aboriginals aren't anywhere near that, and yet they're pushing around our government. They're 1 million people, and we're 32 million. They're not only taking us to court on a constant basis, they're literally talking to our government as if they are equal nations. They don't have their own legal system. They have nothing written down. They don't have their own economic system. They don't have their own borders. They don't have their own military. Well, they do, actually. That's what they do have, is enough angry people to go and do something violent. Why, I don't know. The rest of us can all make it work. I wish the Aboriginals would just see that this is the human experiment. This has been going on since mankind first stood up. We are intermingling, we are intermarrying, we are interbreeding. That is what makes strong people. We're all in this together, and we're all just part of the human race. The more that they isolate themselves and continuously, and they keep themselves on the reserves, and then they blame Canada for the squalor that they live in. What they really need to do is take all of the energy that they do. They're very, very active politically. You've got to see it to believe it. They're incredibly mobilized. When they get up, they only get up to blame Canada. They need to take that energy and turn it towards their people and deal with their drug and alcohol problems, their abuse issues. They have some very serious issues which they need to deal with. And if they took the energy off of the blame and turned it towards. Now, if they want to keep their culture, yes, keep your culture, but not at our expense anymore. Everybody else keeps their culture, and it doesn't cost you. You don't have to go to work on a daily basis and hand over your money. And don't start talking about how this land and the resources are yours. You already have land, and other people are sharing the land too. We are all on this land. It is not your land. And the fact that you talk to people that way, Mr. Aboriginal and Mrs. Aboriginal, is wrong. And us Canadians, please, Canada, stop taking that. Just because we're politically correct and we're polite doesn't mean that we let bullies take over. We just don't do that. We are a culture of trying to fight racism, and you can't just turn your back on this issue as if it's not racism. It's racism. And it's serious, and it's growing all the time. And they are pummeling our politicians. I know how much they pummel. They come in gangs. You can't believe what they did to me. And they call everyone a racist. If they don't get their way, they call everyone a racist, and then they accuse us of genocide. Yes, that's what they accuse us of. Did you not just hear Pam Palmater say that our entire impetus is to wipe them out? You know, no one's really even paying attention. That's how pathetic what her statement just was. It was, what? Really? There are 32 million other people. When did the Aboriginals start caring about other people? They get more privileges and more rights than anyone else. And I want to know, with those white privilege courses, Tim Weiss and Sheila McLean, that you're teaching, do you teach courses on Native privilege and how much it's affecting their psyche? Because it is. The way that they talk to Canadians, and in particular white people, is disgusting. It's really unbelievable. You have to see them come by the thousands and thousands. So they're getting all this clout to be more racist. So they get more money and they get more freebies. I know that's a lot of Aboriginals' work. I'm not referring to those people. And in fact, I'm talking to the I Don't Know More racist bullies. That's who I'm talking to when I refer to them. They're a militant faction that have gotten up, and they've decided that their race own all the land here. Their race alone, that's racism. That's racism, period. And it's bullying. And it has to stop. And Canada has to decide for itself who we are as a nation. What are we all about? We're from everybody around the world. And we make it work. And we should be really proud of that. And we shouldn't ever feel guilty whether we're white, green, black, blue, or gray. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter who was here first either. It doesn't matter what order anyone came in. That's literally equivalent to me going into Richmond, BC right now and saying to the Chinese people, well, my race was here first, so get off my land. I mean, it's so stupid, it's unreal. We can't do that. That's not what we're about. And the Aboriginals can either come with us or they can stay stuck in 10,000 years ago. But let's move on. Let's do this together. Go Canada.